This congregation is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to its life, we affirm our lives within it. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share. As we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. Please join us for hymn number 1059 in your teal hymnal. May your life be as a song, and you may remain seated.
Beautiful. Hello again. Figured out the school, so good news. Okay, well, I have good news this morning. I am not going to talk about cleaning the church. And I also ditched what my husband called my Grecian dissertation that I had been writing for today. So you will not have to hear a 20-minute history lesson, unfortunately. I would like to say, though, I think it is appropriate that I am speaking to you today because it is the closing ceremonies for the Olympics in Paris. And back in ancient Greece, during the time that the Olympics were first held, is when theater also began. So I think that's a pretty cool little parallel there. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, I am still fairly new. I started working here in May, and I am still getting to know everybody. And I've gotten the chance to speak with quite a few people, but not everyone. So I wanted to share a little bit about me, so you could get to know me a little bit better. I was very fortunate to be effectively born into what would later become the most important thing in my life, which is theater. And that story starts a little bit before I was born, in Pueblo. My grandma's laughing, sorry. When my grandma met my grandfather at a restaurant where my great-grandma Merle was working, and my grandpa was sitting with his friends, and his friend said, "I bet you can't get a date with that nice schoolgirl over there." So he walked over and he asked her out wearing the same leather jacket that my mom still has hanging up in her closet. And the rest is history. In 1967, after they were married, my grandparents moved from Pueblo to Montrose, Colorado, where my grandpa opened a music school and taught accordion, and my grandmother taught piano. In 1983, 20 years after the Magic Circle Theater had opened, my grandma and grandpa started working with them. My grandfather did a little bit of everything. He was a director, an actor. He ran the light board, he ran the sound board, he built sets, he did all of the things. And my grandmother did the same. In 1994, unfortunately, my grandfather passed away. And some of my first memories of theater, I'm so sorry, were sitting with him at the lighting board eating goldfish crackers off of the little sliders because that's how he would have me help as a little kid. My mother was also very big in the theater. When she was pregnant with me, at 7 months, she played Daisy May in Little Abner, which is hard to believe, but I was a very small baby. The first show I ever saw was one that my grandfather had directed, which was Annie, Get Your Gun. I was a month old, and it was just over from then on. The first show I cognitively remember, my grandmother took me to see Into the Woods, which my mom had co-directed. She was playing the witch, and I remember being 6 years old, and when she started to sing, "Children Will Listen," I did the same thing I'm doing right now. I started crying. Because I knew that this was something really magical that I got to be a part of. And I got to be there all the time. I was always running around backstage, playing in makeup, getting in things I wasn't supposed to, crawling around in the light booth, and it was a good time. So when Wendy came to me and she said, "We have this position that I think you would be great for as facilities manager here," I said, "Fantastic." And it always kind of made me giggle because people like Richard, who had come to me and said, "Oh, are you figuring out the sound booth?" I was like, "No, the sound booth is what I got down. It's everything else that's the trick here." So that was very cool. My mom and dad met at Magic Circle Theater. My grandmother met my grandfather at Magic Circle Theater. He was a good friend to my grandpa, and he promised to always take care of my grandma and the rest of us, and he has for a very long time. And it is because of that theater that I am here today, and I feel very grateful for that. When I was 9 years old, we moved here to Grand Junction so that my parents could work at the Cabaret Dinner Theater. I don't know, a couple people might remember that one. I worked at that theater from the time I was 9 years old until the day it closed when I was 17. I was at my accounting desk when the IRS came in and said, "Hand me your keys," and I said, "Yes, sir," and I walked out the door, and that was that. I was very fortunate as a youth in this valley to have such a beautiful community to belong to. I spent more time in that building than I ever spent at a house that we ever lived in, and I made friends there that I still have to this day, almost 25 years later. I still talk to them, we're still in contact, all of those things. So it is because of my background in that. I went to college for theater. I started out as a musical theater major, realized I was terrible at music theory, and quickly switched over to technical theater. Scenography, or designing the sets, is my absolute love. That is my favorite thing to do. And I am now fortunate enough to have returned to college after taking a 10-year break to start my family. And I am finishing up my BFA in technical theater. So because of that, I get to teach over at Grand Junction High School. And we're opening up their new theater this year, which is gorgeous. If you haven't gotten a chance to go tour it yet, I cannot recommend it enough. I also cried when I walked into the lighting booth there. So I can tell you where I'm at. I wanted to share with you because everyone here has been so welcoming and kind. And one of the things that was the most welcoming to me was I came into, I think, my second or third staff meeting, and I said, "I have this wonderful group of students who are coming together to build this show." And when I told everyone what we were doing, we were writing a show from scratch in 2 months. For those of you that have ever been a part of a theatrical production or have seen one, you might know how insane that is. I had some of my playwright friends saying, "You've absolutely lost your mind. You're going to, you're going to lose it after this." And I said, "Maybe, but it might be worth it." And Wendy and everybody had a conversation about it, and you all opened your doors to us. So I don't know if you knew about it, but twice a week we were down in the basement putting this show together. And it was possibly one of the most rewarding experiences I have ever had. I started working on it about 2 months before the students came in, and I was doing things like research. I was looking up what might be important to the youths of this age range. We had kids from 12 to, I believe our oldest was 23. So it's a pretty wide group of people. So I was sitting there looking things up, like how to walk kids through things like bullying, human trafficking, what was going to be important to them. I had put out a survey to the students that I already had, and I said, what are the things that you guys would focus on if you were writing your own show? And I got back so many responses that I did not expect. It was surprising to me, certainly, these 15, 16, 17-year-olds who were so in tune with themselves and their friends and the things that they wanted to focus on. I mean, it was just sitting at my computer, it was mind-blowing. And then I got to actually meet them. And these guys, BAM Youth Productions focuses on marginalized kiddos in the Grand Valley. So they are looking at kids who are underrepresented financially or in the classroom. A number of these kids have invisible disabilities, ADHD, autism, those kind of things. Some of you may know my 14-year-old son also has autism and ADHD. So I have ADHD. These are things that are very near and dear to my heart. Also, a vast majority of them were part of the LGBTQIA community. And that, I think here, we know we have a wonderfully open community for that. And trying to communicate that that exists here within town to these younger kids is so important, because so many of them feel like they're going through this by themselves. Just like I did. And that's not a place that it's fun to be. So it was very nice to be able to, I'm so sorry. It was nice to be able to give them a safe place to come together and make friendships and meet peers who were just like them. And they could walk in and see these signs on the wall and know that they were somewhere where they belonged. I lost a number of friends when I was a teenager. Because of the stigma and the culture that surrounds it, especially here in the Grand Valley. So now, not only do these youths have friends that they met through this program, they also know that there's a place here where they will be welcome. And I have to say a huge thank you to all of you for that. Okay, now that I got through that part, we wrote an entire play in 2 months. And that was a huge undertaking that I still am kicking myself over a little bit. I brought everybody in and I said, okay, here are these questionnaires about characters, here are these questionnaires about what you would like the show to tackle. So what can we do? How can we put this together? And these guys ran with these projects. I gave them notebooks, they had them filled out in a week and a half. They had all of these story ideas, they were picking out plot points. We had a bulletin board downstairs. They were filling out these index cards and they would stick them up all over the place and they were moving them around and picking the puzzles. It was amazing to watch. But I noticed one thing while they were doing that. They had all of these big ideas, which is a wonderful place to be. And they were saying, okay, at the end we want this to happen. This is the climax, a giant kraken attacks. They picked a pirate theme, which was wonderful because I thought I was going to have to write all of this original music for this musical that they wanted to do. But luckily most pirate songs are in the public domain, so didn't have to do that. So they had all of these big plot points. They were like, all right, we want to tell this love story. We want to tell about a mutiny. We want to do all of these things. So I wasn't having to shoehorn them into these plots that I thought I was going to have to do. I figured they would have their characters filled out and they would know everything about the character, and then I would have to kind of broaden them out into the story. It actually ended up being the opposite. which was completely different than I expected. But they had all of these big story things, so I was having to walk them through the characters themselves, which was not where I expected to be. So I would sit down with them and I would say, okay, so your character in this scene, let's say the captain, she had a dead parrot that she carried around. If you've been down in my office in the basement, you've seen it. It's on top of my bookshelf in there. And she was making these voices for this dead parrot. And I said, okay, but why is the captain so attached to this parrot? And she thought about it for a little bit, and she came back and she was like, well, you know, she had that parrot since it was a baby, and she raised it up and everything, and it meant the world to her. So when it passed, she got it taxidermied, and now she carries it around the ship and makes a voice for it. And I said, okay, exactly right. You found the little moments in there that go from point A to point B. If I may, now, I want to tell you about a time in my life that I didn't have theater. To give you an idea of how prevalent this has been in my time, in 33 years on this planet, I have never gone more than 3 months without doing something for a show. And that includes painting a set. That includes reading lines for someone. That includes making a poster here and there. I mean, anything. I have friends still from all of the different companies in the Valley who call me and say, can you make this puppet real quick? Sure thing, I got you. That's what I do. Sometimes I end up on stage, sometimes I end up backstage. It's just, I'm pretty much always there. In fact, right now I'm currently working on another show for Grand Junction High School where we're gonna build a bunch of giant puppets, and trying to figure out how to walk the kids through doing that is going to be a challenge of itself. So, the one time in my life I was not involved in theater in some way was when I was pregnant with my twins. You have seen them running around. I'm sure they are the two towhead blondes with different glasses, luckily, who are frequently in the sound booth asking me for a cookie while I'm trying to set levels. When I was pregnant with them, I found out at 20 weeks that they were twins, rather than just one baby, which I had thought. I also found out at that time that they did not have an amniotic membrane between the two of them. So they were sharing the same amniotic sac. And not to get completely medical, but they had their umbilical cords tied in a knot between the two of them, which is a very risky pregnancy. I was considered very, I forget the term for it, but I had to be hospitalized for 10 weeks while they checked. I did 2-hour non-stress tests 3 times a day, every day for 10 weeks to make sure that their heartbeats were still good and going strong. And I was very fortunate because they came through and they were incredibly strong. We found out at that time as well that Cora, my daughter with the short hair, had 12 congenital heart defects that effectively gave her half a heart. So I was shipped off to Denver very quickly from St. Mary's Hospital. They said if she comes early, we can't do anything for her here. So they had me go up there. So I was in a new place, a new town, completely confined to a hospital, strapped to a bed frequently, and not really sure what to do with my time. I didn't have any shows to work on, and my theater friends were looking out for me, and they said, you know, we're not gonna have you design anything while you're laying in a hospital bed. We're not gonna have you do any script work, even though that would have been incredibly helpful at the time. They said, we just want you to focus on you. I didn't know how to do that because the entire time I had been growing up in theater, I had focused on the community. I had focused on the show. What props did we need? Who needed to be on stage? Who was missing an entrance? Whose costume had a tear in it that I could fix real quick? I didn't know how to focus on this person because I had spent my entire life pretending to be some other people that I had read about in scripts. So for the first time, while I was in that hospital, I had to sit down and say, okay, who am I? Luckily, around that time, I was spending an inordinate amount of time on social media. It was my way to keep track of my friends here, back home. of the people that I loved and keep in contact with everyone. We started a group family chat to keep up on updates that we still have to this day, almost 10 years later, because it just makes sense. But at that same time, there was a trend going around on Instagram that was called the 100 Happy Days Challenge. Now that sounds silly and it sounds trite, but one of my friends had tagged me in it, 100 Happy Days, and the goal was to find something throughout your day. Could be something big, it could be something small, but take a picture of whatever it was, post it on social media, and talk about why it made you happy. Now, in the hospital, I was very fortunate that my husband at the time, who I also met on stage and got 3 beautiful children from that relationship, he was able to be in the hospital with me. So my son, who was almost 2, was also able to be there with me. So I didn't have to be by myself like a lot of the women there were. So this 100 Happy Days challenge took over my life pretty completely, because all day long I was looking at each little moment as it happened. I was sitting in the recreational room with the antenatal moms, knitting, sewing, doing all of these things. I was one-on-one with my son with more time than we had ever had before because I wasn't having to work. I was taking care of myself completely for the first time probably in my entire life. And I was having to look at each little moment and say, okay, which one is it going to be today? Which one is the best? Which one can I focus on? And it became the highlight of that experience, as weird as that sounds. Of course, having the twins was the ultimate thing at the end of it. Luckily, the type of twins they are normally deliver at 32 weeks because of the strain on their hearts. Kaylee and Cora were so strong that they got to deliver at 34 weeks and 6 days. So we made it a lot further than people normally do. They told me beforehand I probably wasn't going to get to hold Cora because they assumed they were going to have to whisk her into surgery right away. I got to hold Cora for 10 minutes because she could breathe. Kaylee, on the other hand, immediately had a meltdown and stopped breathing, so she was whisked to the NICU. And that's kind of been par for the course. Cora did eventually require heart surgery, of course, but she has gone. Her cardiologists frequently tell me that they have never seen a heart like hers, even though it is effectively inside out and backwards and only half. For some reason, her anatomy works the way it does to work perfectly for her, which is incredible. You see, we have several heart friends who go through all of these tests every year and have to go to the hospital for weeks and weeks and weeks. Cora goes in for a visit once a year. They look at her, they say she still looks great. She can do anything she wants to do except probably go to the moon, which I haven't told her yet because it's going to break her heart, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I still carried on that tradition even after the twins were born and I had made it out of that hospital. I kept looking for the 100 Happy Days challenge. And occasionally I try to pick it back up, but life is a little more busy these days, so I don't look at it. But at the one time in my life where I didn't have this huge community, I didn't have these stories to distract me, I didn't have something tangible other than growing 2 human beings to work on, which does not occupy your hands as much as you would think it would. That was where I was. So, although it's not, I don't know if I can issue a challenge, but I would like to, if you would like to take it. I did the math, and I don't want to get super political, but from today until Election Day, there are 87 days. Not 100, just 87. For me, election years tend to be a little bit stressful. And I know Wendy has talked about the pendulum swinging back and forth in the past, and I'm trying really hard to climb up that chain and be up at the top so I'm not all over the place, but sometimes it's what we have to do. So my challenge to myself, and I invite you to join me, is going to be looking for those tiny moments, the things that bring you joy throughout your day. And it can be something big, it can be something small. Like you go to maybe the Starbucks in City Market and they make you the best cup of Starbucks coffee you've ever had. Bam. That's a little thing. That's a little win that you can focus on. Over the next coming months, I am going to be focusing on the spectacle of opening a show in a brand new theater. I told the students when we did Matilda last year, I said, this is the last show on this stage, we gotta make it big. And I'm telling them the same thing this year. This is the first show on this brand new stage, we have to make it big. So while they're focusing on all of the big things and building literal dragons and going through the script that's about a girl who has recently lost her sister and is getting to know her through a D&D campaign that her sister had written, I'm gonna be focusing on the little things. Why is this monster attacking these kids? And I'm gonna make all of my tech kids think about that stuff too. Like, yes, we're building a 3-story, 5-headed dragon, but why? That kind of thing. So that is the challenge that I have. And that's a little bit about me and my love of theater. Thank you for letting me share that with you today. And now we are going to sing our closing hymn, number 108. I don't know which hymnal it's in. I apologize. It's in the gray one. Thank you, choir folks. I appreciate you. My life flows on in endless song.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. you all.
once before. I really don't know